wondered what happens when you need justice but a courtroom just feels out of reach? Well, today we're going to explore the amazing world of legal solutions that exist outside the formal system. We're talking about options designed to be faster, cheaper, and way more accessible for everyone. When we think of justice, this is usually the image that pops into our heads, right? The scales, the gavel, the whole formal courtroom setup. And look, this system is built on centuries of tradition, and it's absolutely crucial for finding the truth. But, and this is a big but, that formal system can also get really bogged down. We're talking high costs and super long delays. The truth is, for a lot of people, a lengthy court battle just isn't a realistic option. So that begs the question, how do we make sure justice is for all, not just for those who can afford to wait and pay? Okay, let's dive into the answer. It really lies in this concept called ADR, which stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution. Think of it as a modern approach that's all about finding speedy and effective solutions to problems without getting stuck in the long line for a traditional court case. So what is ADR exactly? Well, put simply, it's a whole toolkit of different methods people can use to settle disagreements without ever stepping foot in a courtroom. It's kind of like a parallel pathway to justice, one that's often way more efficient and a lot less confrontational. And this is where it gets really practical. Why would you choose ADR? Well, for one, it's so much faster. It can resolve issues in a fraction of the time a court case might take. It's also less costly, which is a huge deal for most people. Plus, it's way less formal, so you don't have to deal with all the rigid court procedures. The parties involved can even pick the time and place to meet. And get this, for really technical disputes, like say a construction issue, they can bring in an expert engineer to help find a solution, instead of just relying on lawyers and judges. All right, so let's say you decide to go down the ADR path. What are your options? Let's break down the main tools you'll find in this toolkit. The three big ones, the heavy hitters of the ADR world, are arbitration, mediation, and conciliation. Now, each one works a little differently, and picking the right one really depends on what your dispute is about and, what kind of outcome you're hoping for. Okay, first up, we have arbitration. This is the most formal of the bunch. You've got a neutral third party, called an arbiter, who basically acts like a private judge. They hear the evidence from both sides, and then they make a final decision. Now, here's the crucial part. That decision is legally binding. It's just as enforceable as a court order. Next, we've got mediation and conciliation. Now, they sound pretty similar, but there's one key difference. In mediation, the neutral person is more of a facilitator. Their job is to guide the conversation and help the two parties come up with their own solution. But in conciliation, that third party takes on a much more active, interventionist role. They can actually jump in and propose solutions and suggest ways to settle the whole thing. And this is a really big deal. These alternatives have real legal teeth. If the people in a conciliation process reach an agreement and sign off on it, that document becomes legally binding. It has the exact same power and status as a formal decree from a court. The courts in India are just overloaded. There's this massive backlog of cases. And what that means for regular people is that seeking justice can turn into a really long, really expensive, and honestly, a draining process. This is the big why behind everything we're about to explore. So how does India start to tackle this overload? Well, the first line of defense begins right at the grassroots level with a really unique solution, the People's Court, or the Lok Adalat. The name says it all. Lok means people, and Adalat means court. It's a justice system designed for the people. And it's not just a small thing. It's actually seen as a truly innovative Indian contribution to how law is practiced around the world. But this whole idea isn't exactly brand new. It's got really deep roots. You can think of it as a modern version of the old village panchayats, where community elders would help people resolve their disputes through talking it out, through mediation and arbitration. The Lok Adalat just takes that powerful idea of community settlement and gives it a formal structure. So why would you choose a Lok Adalat? Well, the benefits are huge. First off, there are no court fees, which is a big deal. You also don't get bogged down in a bunch of complicated legal rules. And maybe most importantly, you get to talk directly with the judges. It just makes justice feel more accessible, it's faster, and here's the kicker, the decision is final and binding on everyone. And here's a little piece of trivia for you. The very first Lok Adalat was held way back on March 14th, 1982, in Junagadh, Gujarat. And since then, they've successfully settled just a massive number of disputes all across the country. Okay, so that covers disputes between people. But what happens when your complaint is against a huge organization like a bank or an insurance company? That's where this official watchdog, the ombudsman, steps in. So this word ombudsman, it actually comes from a Scandinavian word that basically means representative. And that's exactly what an ombudsman is. They're an impartial official representative appointed to investigate your complaints against a big company or organization. Now here's what makes this so important. The ombudsman is an outsider. They look at your complaint from a totally external point of view. This is absolutely key to avoiding any conflict of interest, which can happen when an organization is asked to investigate itself. It's all about making sure there's independent and fair oversight. Let's look at a couple of real-world examples in India. You've got the banking ombudsman, who is appointed by the RBI, and they offer a quick and cheap way for customers to deal with complaints against banks. Then you've got the insurance ombudsman, appointed by its own council, which handles complaints about problems with insurance services. See? Two different sectors, but one shared goal: protecting the consumer. All right, so we've gone from personal disputes to consumer complaints. Now let's ramp it up to the highest level of accountability. We're talking about tackling corruption among public officials. Let's look at the Guardians Against Corruption, the Lokpal. The real game changer here was the Lokpal and Lokayukta Act of 2013. This was a landmark law that created a super powerful anti-corruption body. Its specific job is to investigate bribery and corruption among public servants. You have the Lokpal at the central level, and then the Lokayukta working at the state level. So who exactly does the Lokpal have power over? Well, its reach is huge. It covers almost everyone, believe it or not, even the prime minister, although there are some important exceptions for really sensitive areas like national security. But it also includes union ministers, members of parliament, and all levels of government officials. It's incredibly comprehensive. So who are the people that make up this powerful body? Well, the whole structure is designed for integrity and expertise. The chairperson has to be a former Chief Justice of India or someone else who is highly respected with tons of experience. There are up to 8 members total, and this part is crucial. Half of them must come from a judicial background to make sure everything is legally sound. So what can the Lokpal actually do? Well, it has some serious power. It doesn't just investigate, it has its own teams for inquiry and prosecution. Its powers are basically on par with the police and the Central Vigilance Commission. It can even recommend that special courts be set up to fast-track corruption cases. This is a body with real teeth. And get this, for a cool bit of history, while the Central Lokpal Act was passed in 2013, the idea of a state-level Lokayukta has been around for way longer. In fact, Maharashtra was the very first state to introduce it, all the way back in 1971. Okay, so let's step back for a second and connect all the dots. We've looked at 3 really different mechanisms. How do they all fit into the bigger picture? Well, together, they form a multi-layered path to justice. So here's the bottom line. You've got the Lok Adalat for citizen disputes, the Ombudsman for when you have issues with big companies, and the Lokpal for tackling public corruption. These aren't just separate ideas floating around. Together, they create this amazing multi-layered system that offers more accessible, more specialized, and much faster ways to get justice and accountability in India. And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? As India's society and economy keep evolving, these systems have to adapt to. So we have to ask, what's the next big innovation that's needed to make sure there's swift justice for everyone? Thanks for tuning in.